Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode of the What Worked For You show. Today, I'm delighted to have a guest who basically learned how to build his business, turned it into an empire from scratch, taught himself how to code, taught himself business, basically taught himself everything until he sold his company several years later for $10 million. Not too shabby. There's a lot of lessons that are being learned from someone that has been through that. Since then, he's founded a company called GreenPal, which is servicing the lawn service industry nationwide. It's very effective. I've actually used it, so I know it works. So it's going to be a great conversation. Bryan Clayton, it is a pleasure to have you today. How are you?
Frank, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in because I thought this was just so fascinating. You went from running a traditional landscaping company, if I can talk straight, to building and leading GreenPal, which is serving literally hundreds of thousands of people across the United States. When you look at what you've built, what do you think you got most right early on that other people miss, especially with your journey where you literally did everything?
Yeah, well, starting Green Pal, I got a lot of things wrong. And it's okay to get things wrong because you kind of have to treat your business as an experiment. And most experiments don't pan out. There was a couple things we did get right. The part of the I guess benefit of when I started Green Pal was that I had ran a landscaping business for about 15 years. So I knew what it was that was broken with the industry. So I knew that consumers wanted somebody to show up on time, they wanted somebody to show up fast, and they wanted a decent price for a basic service. I knew that need existed in the marketplace. So that was one of the things that we got right. A lot of things we got wrong was how to get there. And so I think a lot of times your vision can be correct, and that's kind of a fixed point that you have, but how you get there changes, and you got to just go from failure to failure and not lose enthusiasm until you get to what it is, the way you see the world, the way it's a little different. And that's kind of how it was for us.
Mm, Well, that language is interesting. Treat your business as an experiment. I'm just sitting there thinking, how many people I know would be paranoid by that statement?
Yeah, totally. And then that's what you get, but it is a reframing because a lot of times as a business owner, you only want to start and invest behind things that you know are sure bets that are going to work out. But the reality is that's not going to teach you much about what it is that customers are looking for or what kind of innovation you're trying to bring to the marketplace. You have to really treat it as a series of experiments, and that action produces information. You have to look at it that way. Is I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to see how it works, and then I'm going to take the learnings that I get, and then I'm going to apply that to the next thing. And if you do that over and over again, you then wake up in a different reality. You wake up in a different world than whereas where you started is one that, okay, I think this might work, but let me try these series of things, and now I know what works, and let's put some more investment behind that. It's kind of like you fire bullets, then fire cannonballs. Is how I think about it.
No, that makes sense. So my question to you, and like I'm in the real estate world, so we're always looking at being risk averse, low
Yeah,
risk. Of course, we all know there is no such thing as a sure thing that works 100% of the time. That is a fantasy world. Amazing how many people believe it, but we all know if we've been around long enough, that's a fantasy. However, being risk averse, managing risk is a real thing. If we treat our business as an experiment, we're basically admitting, okay, there's going to be some risk here.
totally.
So the question is, how do we, especially when we're doing something we've never done before, how do we temper that risk so that if we end up with the downside, which we know will happen at some point, probably multiple times, how do we keep that downside to a minimum? Because what I find, at least in my world, is that downside can get away from you and now it becomes a traumatic event.
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid the risk of ruin. And so you want to take on manageable risk that's going to give you insights. And so I'm thinking in the world of real estate, it might be okay, I want to experiment with a new way of handling inbound calls, because maybe what I do is real estate sales and I get a lot of tire kickers, and so I'm going to implement some sort of AI tool that is going to field inbound calls a little bit better and qualify leads and score them in such a way that I can really give a concierge service to the real qualified people that are looking to buy from me. That might be an experiment that you run for a month. A bad experiment would be I'm going to overbuild on this spec house in a different neighborhood that's not proven out, and the next thing you know, you got a year and $1 million lost. And so I think it's thinking about um, experiments where you could afford to take the loss, and regardless you're going to win because you're going to get more information than what you started with. And in our world of in my world of tech, we are always trying new things that don't pan out. We launch a new feature that we think customers want, and as it turns out, they don't end up using, and that's okay. But now we know something more about them, and we know more about what it is they do want. And so, if you can kind of lower the barrier to trying new things in your business, no matter what you're doing, and looking at them as experiments, and it's okay if they don't pan out, and you can afford to take the hit financially and the time, I think that can help you differentiate yourself from your competitors.
So let me ask you, piggybacking off of that, you're now in the tech sector with GreenPal, software as a service world, especially now in today's AI world, right? Going back, we have seen where the new thing was going to come out. Thinking back to .com as a very common one. I was actually in tech at the time, and we all saw how that worked out. And then there's been various ups and downs, the latest one being AI. Some people say it's here to stay, which I believe. Some people say it's a bubble. Every business is now an AI master for something that's only been out for a little over 2 years. So that's kind of an interesting thought. But how do you know when, okay, we can experiment with tech? Maybe it's AI, maybe it's some other form of tech. But how do we make sure this is not going to be one of those bubble stories that blow up? Because the list of stories like that of startups that tried, got a ton of venture capital, and bye bye
Yeah,
is an
yeah, totally.
extensive list.
Yeah, it's the quote that one of my favorite Bill Gates quotes. He says that we overestimate what will happen in a year, and we underestimate what will happen in 10 years. And so, like going back to the .com bubble, it kind of feels like that almost. And as it turns out, every one of those .com bombs ended up being true. It was just 10 or 20 years later. And that's kind of where we're at with AI now, except for I think it's gonna cycle a lot quicker. And I think the what you're looking for as a small business owner of the user of these pieces of technology and the user of these tools is to look for real world validation in other use cases. And so always be looking for other industries that are using similar tools, and how can you use them in your business. Maybe even bigger companies, like maybe you call into I did an insurance claim the other day, and I had to call I think it was Prudential Insurance, and the entire thing was handled by an AI agent. I didn't talk to anybody, and it actually worked. And so that I got my wheels turning. That okay, this technology is now working. I need to look at how we can implement it in GreenPal for people that are calling about routine things, and rather than waiting for a return phone call, they can get help immediately. And so you're looking for points of validation from other bigger operators, bigger players that are using the technology, and then you see how you can use it in your world. Is how I think about it. You don't want to be an early adopter of a lot of this stuff, and like a true at the leading edge innovator of it, unless you've got some really deep pockets. And so if you're a small business owner or you're a solo operator, it's better to look for it to be validated in other real world examples, and then you go find the best in class for your business, and start tinkering with it, start experimenting with it.
So when you started GreenPal, as I was thinking about that, you talked about the phone call you just had with Prudential, and it made you think, oh, well, maybe I can do that in GreenPal. Is that sort of how Green Pal started? Because you sold your landscaping company, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and then you started Green Pal. But was it just one of those? Like, was there a vision of this before you started it, or was it like, you know what, that sounds cool, let's go start Green Pal, right? Like, how did this come about?
Great question. So I always saw when I was running my landscaping business, I always saw how it was difficult for buyers and sellers to get connected with each other because I ran this landscaping company with like not 100 vehicles going out every day with our names on the side. And in Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm from, we kind of had a little bit of a brand and people knew us. And so they would always call our office wanting basic lawn mowing. And we no longer did that. We only did like big apartments and commercial properties. And so we would have to refer them to smaller operators, smaller kind of one person small businesses. And so in effect, we were kind of this connector service at a local level. We were already a referral service. And so I saw that work in an analog sense, in a non-digital sense, in a hand cranking way. So I knew the problem existed, and I knew that a technology platform could help solve it. And so when I sold that company, that idea was in the back of my head. But really, what gave me the confidence was the first time I ever took an Uber. I think it was 2013 or 14. And that was magical to me. You pushed a button and a car just showed up. Now we take it for granted, but back then it was something magical. And I remember that experience. I thought, okay, this is going to be the future. I need to go ahead and build out this technology, but for this little industry, I know landscaping maintenance. And so the idea was one that I saw in the real world. It was validated by other industries doing it, and it gave me the inspiration, and it gave me the confidence to kind of bet my life on it, so to speak. I ended up putting a decade of my life into this idea, and it was the only good idea I had. So I got lucky in a sense that I was kind of solving my own problem, and I think if you're starting a new business, that can be helpful if you solve your own problem that you're seeing in the world.
I like it. I like it. And I was just taking a note here because you just gave me an idea. So I was like, let me write that down.
Nice,
I always
nice.
get ideas on these calls. I'm like, hold on, let me write that down.
I love it.
Uh, um, so Green Pal didn't start with venture capital hype. You basically, it started with real problems, real customers, like you just described. What was the discipline like to start this? The decision making to get it going, and is that the same decision making still guiding it today?
Yeah, it was one that we didn't raise funding, and so I think I'm not anti venture capital. If you look on your phone on the home screen, odds are every single icon on the phone was the result of a venture backed business, and so venture capital does create these empires, but it also I think ruins more small businesses, ruins more startup ideas than it helps create. And so
Mm,
we were lucky in a sense that we did not we were from Nashville, Tennessee, still headquartered there, and there isn't a big deep pool of venture capital for technology businesses, kind of sloshing around Nashville. And so there was only a handful of investors we could pitch. We pitched them all; they all said no, and so that was kind of the end of it.
mm,
And so we thought, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we need to build a product that customers love and not one that investors love, and because we need customers. And it was kind of like necessity is the mother of invention. We had to build something that people wanted to use, that they would pay for, and then we would take that money and reinvest it into the product. And it was very humble in the early days. It was like a very, Mark Cuban says the least you can live on, the greater your options. And that's how it was for my co-founders and I. We had a very, very small personal burn rate. I didn't want to take any of the funding, any of the money I had from my first business and put it into this business because I didn't know how to deploy it. So I kind of thought, okay, we're just going to grow it off of its own revenues and see what happens. And it was very much a reality that caused us to focus on what mattered, and it caused us to focus on the dozen or so customers we started with. Let's get that dozen to 100, and now we got 100 customers. Let's get that to 500. Now let's get it to 1,000, and we just kept making these little small goals growing this customer base, on a weekly basis. And that's still what we do. Now we have 300,000 customers and we're trying to get to 1 million customers. And so it is still very much the same game we were playing, just bigger numbers.
Mm, mm. So 300,000 customers. I mean, that's a lot of people.
We want
That's
to
a,
be at 1 million. And so we feel
yeah,
like when we get to 1 million, we will be in like the same camp as an Instacart or a DoorDash or an Uber. It's like, okay, don't mow your yard, just get a green pal. We want to be a noun, a verb. We want to be in the English language. And so that's the goal.
yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Well, the good news is there's more than 1 million houses in the country.
Yeah,
So
we're just a drop in the
the
bucket.
odds are in your favor. It can be done. I love it. I've heard people, I've heard people actually say this, and I saw this online when I was preparing, being called the Uber for lawn care. And you referenced Uber earlier, so I was like, it's all just lining up. I love it. Uh, but getting to that kind of scale, like you just mentioned, 1 million people, obviously just getting to 300,000 requires tremendous execution. And you were talking more than triple that. What are some of the habits, systems involved that allow this kind of thing to happen? Because when someone's starting out in business, or maybe nowadays you hear a lot about people buying businesses. You may buy a business and you've got these grand aspirations, but then getting there, that's a little bit different. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's one that, you always are wondering where you should focus, and you always want to like focus on the highest leverage, highest impact things you can do. And the way I think about it is I look at the business and I put it into three buckets. So I put it into get, keep, and grow. And so get is how do we get more people to use the product? How do we put it in front of more people when they need it? How do we get more customers? Do we focus all of our intensity in that bucket, or do we focus on the keep aspect? How do we keep more of the people that are using it? How do we keep more? How do we retain more? How do we upsell them? How do we get them to refer people? And then there's the grow aspect, which is how do we grow the book of business for our service providers? How do we grow the average order cart size of the people that are using it to order services? And so we think about it along those three buckets very simply, and then we kind of stagger our initiatives across them. And so we'll maybe 1 quarter we'll just only focus on the get aspect. And so it's like how do we cast a wider net to be in more places when people are looking for lawn care services, in more small towns, more neighborhoods, more different SKUs like shrub pruning, gutter cleaning, snow removal, things like that. And then the next quarter, we might just focus on the keep aspect. Okay, our retention rate is this. We need to move that a couple of points. And then another quarter, we'll focus on the grow aspect. Okay, how do we increase our referral rate? How do we increase our NPS? And so we set aside time for every single one of those buckets, and then cycle through them, because you don't really know what, at my stage of the game. Maybe when you get bigger you do know, but at my stage of the game you don't really know what the total ROI is going to be on any given initiative. You just have to make sure you're covering all your bases.
That's such a good word. I love that. And I really appreciate it. This idea of you don't really know the ROI until you get in there and get going.
That's right, and it goes back to that experiment mentality. It's like you don't really know until you try the first few steps, and then you know
Yeah.
more.
In my world of real estate, they talk about pro formas all the time.
Yeah.
And every very experienced operator I know is like, yeah, that's just junk. It sounds good for a pitch, but when you get in it and you really get your hands dirty, even if you're not the one managing and you're managing the manager, it always changes every
That's
time.
right. And it's good to have a plan, and it's good to put together a plan. The process of planning does help, but it's like the Mike Tyson quote, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the nose. And that's how a pro forma usually works. And that's how a business plan usually works. And that's how financial modeling on this new SEO thing that we're doing usually works. It's like, okay, that didn't go according to plan. And that's okay.
Yeah, if you're gonna be a business owner, you just have to go ahead and plan on buying a nose guard
That's
because you're
right.
going to get punched in the nose. It's not if, it's when, and it's going to be more than once. In fact,
That's
it'll
right.
probably be more times than you planned on.
It's just part of it.
It's just part of the game. Let's back up in time for a moment. What drove you to get into this world of landscaping in the first place?
So, I love that question because I've never had a boss. I've always had my own little business. My first business was mowing yards. And what got me into it was I wanted a pair of soccer cleats at 15 years old. And back in 1995, the good soccer cleats were 110 bucks. And my dad was more of a buyer of a $20 pair of soccer cleats. And so he said, if you want to get the $100 ones, I heard the neighbor needs their grass cut. And luckily that happened for me because I he lined it up and I mowed the neighbor's yard and got paid 20 bucks for like an hour of work. And that was amazing to me. And that just clicked. And I passed out a bunch of flyers, got maybe 10 more of those gigs and never looked back and just kept growing that little book of business in my neighborhood. And then when I got my license, I got a truck and a trailer and then went to business school at night and mowed grass all day. My classmates hated me because I would come into night school with grass clippings all over me, smelling like gasoline. And graduated business school and thought, I don't really want to be a lawn guy my whole life, but this business, it could be my lane. I could build a decent sized company here, and made a little business plan and started working hard, and the rest is history.
You just mentioned something we got to hit on. You started this when you were young. Awesome. So you had that spirit when you were young, got into it, got going, but you went to business school. A ton of entrepreneurs don't learn about business until you learn it the hard way. This idea. What did you learn in business school?
A couple of three or four really foundational things. One, big basic business accounting and how important that was. That was probably one of the most important things I took out of a business degree was all of the accounting classes and how knowing what your costs are and your unit economics and your gross margin and knowing how to measure that probably was one of the reasons why I was able to take this kind of usually unstructured, unprofessional business and turn it into something that was scalable. Not at a huge level, but we ultimately got to eight figures in sales, and so you understanding unit economics and basic accounting principles was a big one. Another one was business law, understanding that there's this whole world of law that applies to you as a business owner, and you better damn well sure be aware of it, and you better understand how contracts work and understand how to structure contracts and when you're in a contract and when you're not. And so that was important. Basic business strategy and marketing, uh, those things were helpful. Although a lot of those things you do learn on the fly and you do learn just through the sheer act of trying to grow a business, but they were certainly helpful. And then also being able to communicate in writing, uh, and doing it in a professional way, like all of the foundational like literature classes that I took, and in business communication, being able to put together a sales presentation and understand basic copywriting and these things. So I took quite a bit out of it, um, and I almost think that maybe I probably wouldn't have been as successful without a business degree. And it took me 7 years because I went at night, just three or four classes a semester. um, and I don't regret any of it. If I had to do it all over again, I would do it the same way.
What I love about it is so many people get into business and you do what you do, but you don't understand the fundamentals of business.
Right.
And clearly, and I love that the very first thing you said was accounting, which I can tell you in my world of real estate, that's usually one of the last things that gets talked about, which I believe is a mistake. And I just love that your path when early, here's some business fundamentals that clearly
Totally.
helped. And I know you're being modest. Oh, wait, it wasn't too bad. It was 8 figures. Yeah, it's not much. But so, no, congratulations. That's awesome. I love it. And, and I appreciate your modesty there. But to me, I mean, that's very successful. And I love how you had those fundamentals.
Basic
Looking,
building blocks, yeah,
yes.
that were crucial. That a lot of times, particularly in a business that is not as like glamorous as the landscaping business, they proved to be a competitive advantage for me because a lot of my competitors were not thinking that way, especially in
Mm,
a market like Nashville. They weren't applying that type of methodology to a business like this, and so I kind
mm,
of got lucky in that way.
mm, mm. I love it. Well, and that answered my next question is, looking back, how did those fundamentals help,
Yeah,
looking back?
yeah, and they helped in the way of building a business that had a good like sound financial model and a good sound financial foundation to it, but also building a business that could differentiate itself from its competitors because a lot of times in especially in the landscaping business there is no differentiation between choices between who you can hire to maintain a an office complex or an apartment complex and that was one thing that business school taught me was what a value proposition is and what differentiation in the marketplace actually looked like and thinking about that what is the difference between these substitutes and whereas my competitors were just trying to sell on price and things that customers didn't care about, quite honestly. And so that was something that helped put me on second or third base.
I love it. You built a successful company in that world. You're cruising along, you're doing very well. What made you decide to sell?
It was not in the plan. I really
Mm,
thought that I was going to run that business as a lifestyle business and maybe hand it down to family members at some point, and because I was very content running it for probably 13 years, and then something weird happened. I didn't realize that as I was running this company, I was evolving into a whole new person every like year or two because nobody teaches us really how to be a manager or a leader. Nobody really teaches us a lot of these things that go into running a successful small business. And so I was being forced into learning them on the fly. And in a weird way, that was fulfilling to me at some sort of deep level that I didn't understand as it was happening. And about year 13, I guess that plateaued. And it wasn't like I had conquered, my industry or anything, but I had kind of gotten the business to a point where it was no longer forcing me to learn new things. And it was no longer forcing me, I guess, really outside of my comfort zone. I had gotten it to a good point where it was almost on cruise control and profitable. And that lack of personal development and it not happening was like unsettling to me. And I just was not fulfilled by the journey anymore. And I became unsatisfied by running the business at a personal level. And I thought, well, maybe I can, maybe I can get this company acquired and create the space for the next thing, whatever that is. And so from the moment I had that idea to the moment that the business was ultimately acquired by a national company doing hundreds of millions of dollars, it took about 2 years. And the weird thing was after that 2 years, I almost like fell in love with it again because it was now a whole nother set of challenges trying to reverse engineer a lot of things into the business, taking the business almost down to the studs in many places and rebuilding it. It wasn't a fun thing, but the result of having done it was very satisfying to me, very fulfilling to me. And what I learned was that if you ever want to sell your business, you better like be in love with it because nobody wants to buy your problems. And so I had to fix all of those things, and then got it to a point where I was in love with it again, and then it was acquired. And so and in a weird way, I didn't want to cut it loose, but at that point, everything had already been put in motion. And then the space was created for me to start Green Pal. and I'm glad that that happened that way, because now I get to start that process all over again, where every year or two I'm a whole new person because I'm doing things I never have done before in my life.
Love it, love it. Did you sell to private equity by chance?
It was well, so there was probably 10 interested parties, two or three of them were PE. The company that ended up buying it was PE backed, but they were operators of independent landscaping companies all over the country. So they probably owned 30 different companies of my size or bigger and smaller in different major markets throughout the country. And they wanted to be in Nashville. And so that's how it all lined up.
Got it, got it. I bring that up because you mentioned nobody wants to buy my problems, and I've learned private equity firms, they like to buy stuff that's humming.
Yeah. Yeah. You better
They want that.
love your business. You better love it. You better be willing. I mean, if you took a vacation, you come back, it needs to be running smooth without you, maybe even better. It's like nobody's gonna. A lot of people want to sell their business because, like, oh man, I'm burnt out. There's got all these things wrong with it. I don't want to deal with it anymore. Nobody's gonna buy that, and so it's important for that to be said. Like, it better be running smooth, and then it's ready to be acquired.
Mm, good stuff, good stuff. So let's move forward then. You get into GreenPal, and it's effectively a tech company where now we're merging tech with what your love that you did before. But you were telling me you taught yourself to code. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, how many CEOs are like, all right, just sold the company, let's start coding. That's kind of a radical shift.
Yeah, it was not because I wanted to. And it was really, it was kind of like going back when I was starting my landscaping business. I didn't want to learn accounting. I didn't want to learn bookkeeping. I didn't want to learn copywriting. I didn't want to learn leadership and management and all that stuff, but I had to get that business from level one to level two and three and four and so on. And so that's how it was with GreenPal. I was starting all over again from scratch at level one, maybe even level zero, starting the company. And what I learned the hard way, and I'd kind of known this from my previous business, was that you really can't delegate anything unless you have done it yourself to a certain degree. And trying to delegate something from a standpoint of, hey, you go handle that. I don't know how to do it. Let me know when you get it done. It almost never works. Like delegation from abdication. Like, I don't know how to do it. And that's how coding was. Like, my co-founders and I tried to hire a development shop, a development agency to build what we thought this app GreenPal should be. And they took like almost a year and like $100,000 or $200,000 of our money, and it was a total failure, total flop. It barely worked. And what we learned the hard way was, okay, we're gonna have to learn how to code. We're gonna have to go to YouTube University and like take coding tutorials, and that's what we did. And we rebuilt the whole damn thing from scratch, learned how to code side by side while we were building it. And then after I got basic mastery of that, my co-founder as well, we were then able to delegate to software developers and build a team around us that were going to help us move faster. And it's the same thing like in the real estate world. Let's say you wanted to, I don't know, you wanted to have somebody under you, helping you move real estate quicker. And if you had never done that, you would never know how to train them on how to do it. And so I think it's pretty much the same in any business.
No, for sure, for sure. And now you're talking about you have software developers. Do you have AI coding for you now? It does some pretty slick stuff I hear.
Yeah, so the promise of it doing everything is not here yet, and I don't know if it ever will be, but it helps you move a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it takes you from like I when I learned how to code, I was the world's worst front end engineer. So I was the world's worst developer, but I knew just enough to cobble something together that kind of worked. With AI, it would take me from like a D to a B plus. And so what it really does is it levels people up. It can take somebody who's a C player and turn them into an A player. And so it helps you move a lot quicker. It takes a lot of the redundant stuff, a lot of the tedious stuff off of your plate, and enables you to focus on higher leverage stuff.
Yeah, no, no. I've seen where I've read you know playing with a piece of software for whatever reason you throw some it gives you some code error. It's like let me ask AI and it's like oh
Oh
yeah do you
yeah,
have the code? Here's the code. And it's like oh yeah change line 152. There's a little parenthesis missing and all of a sudden it works. You're like wow.
that used to take you all day. That's right.
Yes, yes,
That's right.
and a bunch of money.
Yeah, that's right. And so it definitely helps with those types of things. It is not at a point where it's like, hey, here's my idea, go build it. Maybe one day it will be, but it's not. It's not quite there yet.
Piece by piece, little by
Yep.
little. As you're building, as you were building GreenPal, and conversely, your landscaping company, there's always points with entrepreneurs where we have our doubts, and doubt can be really loud. Where we're like, tell us about a time of doubt in either company where you were thinking to yourself, is this really going to work?
Yeah, it's that doubt is kind of like anxiety, and it's just like this unsettled feeling that you feel. The only thing I have found to help with that is action. So that action really helps resolve that, because the action is what gives you more information, and the more information helps cure that. And a lot of times, like I had a lot of doubt building GreenPal in the early days, because it was like this big smack in the face of like, if you build it, they will not come. And so we spent a year building this thing, and it was like it was crickets. And so then you have like this doubt: do people want this? And you have to answer that question. And so the action we took was we passed out flyers, literally, like we passed out like 100,000 door hangers all over Nashville, Tennessee. And I knew that wasn't a scalable user acquisition strategy, but I needed data, I needed information, I needed people to use this thing. And so after passing out these things, we got maybe 1,000 people to use it, and out of that 1,000, maybe 50 people hung around and kept using it. And then I was able to talk to those people, go to meet them at Starbucks, literally meet them in their kitchen and watch them use the product, and watch all of the things that I thought were this way, but actually were that way. And all of these assumptions that I had that were wrong, and all of this stuff that we were doing that was pissing them off. And so it helped cure the doubt, because now, they all told me like all of the reasons we suck, but then none of them said, I don't need this. None of them
Mm,
said, I don't want this. Matter of fact, it was kind of like, wow, wouldn't this be great if it did work? And so that
wow.
helped cure the doubt. So a lot of times the way to deal with that anxiety, deal with that doubt, is just to do something. Like literally, okay, pass out some flyers, like do something, and that will help. That'll help cure that.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you had 1,000 people sign up. You went from 200,000 hangers, a lot of hangers, by the way, to that's a lot of
A
hangers,
lot, a
hangers.
lot.
That's and then you had 1,000 people sign up. I'm not sure what ratio that is, but
Not
small.
good.
Yeah, yeah. But it's going, and then you only had 50, and then you took that step where you met with the 50 or maybe a subset, whatever it was, and yet you had assumptions on how people would use it. And the thought going through my mind is we're cutting lawns. How much is there to assume?
Right.
Clearly, there's more than we think. Tell us about that lesson a little more in depth.
Yeah, it's like you would think, how hard could it be? But
Exactly.
as it turns out, hiring a lawn care operator, a lawn care professional sucks. And then on the other side, making a living as a lawn pro sucks. And it's like there's a million things that go wrong between you having grass that's 2 feet tall and having a freshly manicured lawn. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong. Weather, doesn't have the right equipment. He was sick that day. His daughter was sick that day. His employee got a DUI. He just didn't feel like working. He mismeasured it and quoted the wrong price. Actually, he thought it was this street, but it was actually another side of town. Customers' expectations, they want a golf course looking lawn rather, like a million things can go wrong. And so, as it turns out, like it was our job as the platform to now solve all of those things. And
Mm.
the way we did it was almost like a battlefield hospital tent where you're triaging around all of this chaos around the two or three things that really matter at any given time. And then you focus all of your intensity on those two or three things. You fix those, and then you move down the list to the next two or three. And the only way for us to really know what the hell those were was to hustle up 50, 100, 200 people to use it, because you have all these assumptions that it's just going to go smooth, and it doesn't. And so that was how we figured that out, was just by brute forcing the liquidity, the activity into the platform. And then also, I thought that customers just wanted the cheapest person to mow their yard. That was how we built the platform. We built it to optimize around pricing efficiency and competitiveness amongst vendors. And actually, what I came to find out was, after enough kitchen table meetings, enough over the shoulder conversations, was that they just really wanted somebody to show up on Thursday when they were supposed to. That actually what we were solving was this mysterious case of the disappearing, ghosting lawn guy. That actually these
So much
guys don't
truth.
show up, and they fall off the end of the earth and never call you back. And that was the problem we really were solving. And it was not so much about price optimization. And so I would have never known that had I not met belly to belly my early users, my early customers, and talked to them and discovered what the actual pain points were.
What's really fascinating about that is Green Pal's been going, what, a decade now, something like that,
That's
whatever
right.
it's been. So you were solving for that problem. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, of all the different trade businesses, because we've done a lot of construction, and I'm like, that problem's still not solved.
Right.
We need electric pal. We need, maybe we should partner, Brian.
Yeah,
I got a lot of pals I need.
that's
No, my
right.
electrician's great, but I know a lot of people that have said my electrician didn't show up, my roofer didn't show up, my whoever didn't, right? It doesn't matter what the trade
Exactly.
is.
It's no different in landscaping maintenance. The reliability of these contractors is not so seamless. And so it's our platform's job is to fix that problem. And that was the main problem that our customers wanted us to fix, that I didn't know until I started talking to them face to face.
That problem has never changed in all the years I've
No,
done this. Just
no,
someone to show up when they're supposed to show up to do the job. Huge, huge thing, huge thing. Let me ask you something. What's one of the most painful lessons you've learned as now as a founder of two different businesses?
yeah, the painful lesson I guess I learned was you you can't assume what it is people will do. You can't go with how you see the world. You have to meet customers where they're at and adapt to how they see the world. There's this weird gap that forms between every business owner and the customer. It's like the founder logic and the customer logic. And the founder is looking at like what he or she does from like one angle, one perspective. And then the customer is looking at it from like a totally different like planet almost. And like there's this weird thing where they're not even speaking the same language. They don't look at it at the same way. And it's somehow or another they meet in the middle and commerce occurs. And the painful lesson I've learned is like your perspective, your paradigm does not matter. You have to literally get in the shoes of your customer, and you need to be paranoid about it, because if you isolate yourself from that too long, you then wake up in a world where you don't really understand what it is your customer wants. And so the way I deal with this is I still do at least an hour every day, sometimes maybe two, of actual customer, like one-on-one service, customer support. I answer them 1-800 phone number. I do in-app chat. I go through email tickets. Even though we have a team of about 3 or 4 people that handle this stuff, I still get in there into the trenches and do it, because then I'm talking to customers one-on-one and I know what it is they're saying. And when we're in team meetings, I can speak with like credibility and confidence that, hey, no, actually I talked to 5 people last week and it's actually this. And so that's something I'm always paranoid about. I've screwed it up, particularly my first business. I didn't want to hear what customers had to say. I thought that they were insatiable, unreasonable, irrational. And so I kind of isolated myself from customer feedback for years. And then that cost me. And I had to pay down a lot of that debt that accumulated in the business. And so I didn't want to make that same mistake with Green Pal. And I am always paranoid that there's a gap forming between the way I think and the way my customers think.
Oh, I love it. And that's so true. That's so true. Is it's so easy to think that we know what our customers want.
Right.
It's so easy
We're not
because
Steve Jobs. We're not Henry Ford. Okay,
yeah,
we are humble small business operators. We have to listen to our customers, or we will have none.
yes, and it's staggering how easy it is to assume because in our brain it's like it's simple, and which is why I love the example of when you went into all those kitchens when you had 50 people for Green Pal because it's like, oh my gosh, we're totally focused on the wrong thing. And
Exactly.
that's just powerful. And I think the small business owners, any business owner, doesn't have to be small business. When we get into that and we understand what people want, I mean, I think of a company like Amazon. I mean, they've got this dialed in really well.
That's right.
I'm always impressed by it's like, wow, they actually are thinking what I would be thinking.
Totally. And there's all kinds of stories of Bezos being in meetings. First off, they do this kind of hokey thing where they had an empty seat at the table with every meeting, and that was where the customer sat. And then that was weird, and they put a big teddy bear in that seat, and the teddy bear was like the seat of the customer. A little hokey, but it's still it forces them to to at least metaphorically think about the customer has a seat at the table. And then there's this interesting story where Bezos is like, I hear everybody's complaining that they have to sit on hold too long when they call in, and the chief of that department was like, no, here's the metrics. The metrics say that we average hold time is 45 seconds. That's what the metrics say. He goes, I don't know. I'm hearing that people are not happy about that. Let's call right now. And that's what he did. And he called right then, right now, and made everybody sit there in silence for 14 minutes while
Wow.
their team, while he exposed the problem as it actually existed. And so you have to, no matter at what level, if you're a small business owner, if you're at the level where Bezos was, it's like you have to like get in the trenches and see for yourself.
I bet that meeting concluded real quick after
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like, did somebody YouTube that? That would have
I
been good.
love that
See
story. Yeah.
that? So now moving forward, you sold your first company. You're in the middle of Green Pal today. How has your definition of success evolved over the years?
For me, I think that should evolve. When I first started mowing grass, the success was buying a pair of soccer cleats that I wanted, and then it was buying a new lawnmower, and then it was hiring my first employee, and then it was, getting 1 million in revenue, and then success was actually okay, maybe 5 million, and then success was like, actually, no, none of that matters. What success is the 20 people at that time that work here and helping them get where they're trying to go in life and helping them pay for student loan debt or helping them put a down payment on a house. That's success now. And then now with Green Pal, success was like, okay, can I just get 100 people to use this damn thing, and then growing that number, and now success for me is like building something that actually matters in people's lives. And what I mean by that is the lawn care services that use our platform, their life depends on,
Hmm.
their livelihood depends on this app working properly. It used
Mm.
to be when we went down, like in the early days. One time in the early, like the first year, we went down for like 12 hours and nobody knew, nobody said anything. And then another year went by and we went down, and people actually called, and that was a big moment. And now, with Cloudflare going down a couple of weeks ago, we were down for like 3 hours, and man, the phone went off the hook with service providers like, "Hey, I can't make any money today. What is going on?" And like that sucked. I hated that, but also it it wasn't our fault, but it reinforced that what we are building matters.
Mm,
And to me, that's success. And I will always feel successful so long as that's the case.
mm. I didn't know Cloudflare went down. Wow, that'd be a real big
Yeah, and
day.
it was not good. It was almost a full
No.
day. It
Wow, wow. I mean, I don't know, I don't deal in that space, but I do know what that is. I'm like,
yeah,
ugh,
it was
wow.
not a fun day.
No, I imagine. I imagine. What advice you give somebody today that would feel, in their words, behind? A lot of entrepreneurs feel like they're behind. Maybe it's in their own business. Maybe they made mistakes. They're having to fix things, start over. Maybe they're changing industries. Maybe they're starting fresh. And because of our social media crazy world, that paints, everyone's perfect life, people feel like they're behind when it's not realistic. When you're starting out. But regardless, whatever the reason, people always seem to feel like behind. I need more time. I can't get enough done. Right. And it's the goal always seems so unattainable to so many entrepreneurs. What would your advice to them be?
Yeah, it's easy to feel behind because a lot of times you can get stuck in this rat race where you are just bound by in the business activities. You just cannot get your head above water because you are in it so much. And what I mean by that is you're answering phone calls, you're dealing with customers, you're fulfilling customers' needs, you're fixing bugs on the website, you're running around town, you're mailing, you're paying vendors, you're doing everything. You're in it.
Hmm.
And you feel behind because everything you're doing is just trying to keep your head above water, and you're not setting enough time aside for high leverage activities, and you don't have any leverage in the business. And what I have found when I am stuck in those moments is like I have to really set aside time to do two other things. It's like you need to be doing three things at all times. You need to be working in the business, just keeping it afloat, and then you need to be working on the business. What are the systems, processes? What are the routines? What are the standard operating procedures? What are the two or three hires that we need to make? And then that's on the business. And then the third bucket is working on yourself. It's like, okay, I don't know a damn thing about AI. Let me just go to AI University on YouTube. And what I mean by that is let me just watch as many interviews and talks and fireside chats and tutorials as I can about this for as many hours as it takes, all day Sunday every week until I get up to speed, get on first base about what this is. So you're working on yourself. You are leveling up and you're shoring up where you're coming up short. And so you need to be doing all three of these, and you need to be setting aside real time. Maybe Monday through Friday is in the business, and then Saturday is on the business, and then Sunday afternoon is on yourself. That's how you can get out of this, like get out of this, get stuck, you get out of this rut of being like behind, is setting aside time for these higher leverage things like on the business and on yourself.
And that on yourself part is really, really important.
Yeah. It's not talked about enough.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of people will talk about, work on yourself more than anything else, and people allocate 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
You just talked about dedicate a whole day of the week to it.
Yes. 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 And focused. And then but then people will only focus on yourself. So they'll say, oh, the best investment you can make is on yourself. And that's true, but that's all they do.
Uh,
And then they don't do anything else that's tactical or practical or actually okay, you took 20 online courses this week. Well, that doesn't matter. It's got to be a balance of in it, on
yeah,
it, and on yourself.
that's so true. So true. Let me ask you one more question. Green Pal today, 300,000. You talked about earlier the Gates quote, overestimate a year, underestimate 10 years. Goal of Green Pal is 1 million. What happens when Green Pal hits 1 million? What's the future look like?
It's like I heard a quote the other day: "New levels, new devils," and so it's like you think as a small business owner is like, okay, if I can just get to this sales number, or if I can just make these two or three hires, or if I can just get this key client, things will be good for a while. And no, what that means is now you got those things done. Now you've got five more things to do. And it's like just because you solve two or three problems, that means you get to solve three or four more. And I think that's how it's going to be for us when we get to a million. Okay, now we got to a million, we got to get to three. And how are we going to do that? Is it international? Is it more SKUs? Is it more network effects in the major cities we operate in? And that's another level of the game that we're not playing right now. And that's okay. We need to focus on the level we're on, but that'll be another level unlocked, and that'll be its own set of challenges, and it'll be fun for its own reasons. And I think this embracing that it never ends. It's an infinite game is part of any business.
That's so true. It's not like playing a video game at home where eventually the game can end. Business never
Yeah,
does.
that's right.
Love
That's
it.
the beauty of it.
Well, Bryan, I want to thank you for coming on. This was super, super fun just hearing these insights. Clearly, you love what you do, and the passion is clear, the energy, and so forth. And so I love you taking the time to share today. So I appreciate it. And to our listeners, if you want to check out what he's got going on, we'll have a link to his website, a link to him if you want to connect with him and chat. But but I will tell you, I've used their service as a real estate person. You know, with different properties we've worked with, it works. So definitely check that out, and then feel free to connect further from there. So Bryan, thank you again for coming on. It's always fun to talk to someone where I'm actually have used your service, so I love it. It's like, how cool is that?
Well, thank you,
So
Frank. I
I can
appreciate you.
attest.
Yeah, I appreciate you using it. And like I told you earlier, I do customer service. So anything that goes wrong, you let me know, and we'll figure out what happened.
I will do that. My business partner, she does a lot of property management, so she uses it more than I. I'm going to tell her, I said, guess who I talked to today? And so
Awesome,
she's like, oh, so
fantastic.
she might be calling you. But anyhow, in the meantime, thank you again for being on. Can you leave us with a final word?
Yeah, with everything going on with AI and everything, you can as a founder, you can easily feel like, oh, I'm too late, I missed it. And the reality is it's day one. It is, in my opinion, no better time to start a business of any kind than now. And you didn't miss it. We are at the very beginning of another super cycle, another tidal wave. So get started, get in the game. You didn't miss it. It's not over.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for coming on today. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Frank. I enjoyed it.